Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on relaxing any conservation area restrictions that prevent the installation of solar panels and other energy-saving initiatives.
Minister Alistair Allen.
In May last year, the Scottish Government amended permitted development rights to allow solar panels and replacement windows to be installed on domestic and non-domestic buildings in conservation areas without the need for a planning application. This was an important change which strikes an appropriate balance between tackling climate change and protecting important historic buildings and townscapes. These rights are subject to specific restrictions, such as allowing solar panels to the rear of buildings in conservation areas.
Colin Beattie.
I am regularly contacted by my constituents who are understandably frustrated as these restrictions mean they are unable to install solar panels. Can the Minister advise what support the Scottish Government has in place to help my constituents in conservation areas contribute to our journey to net zero?
Minister.
I should say that even in those circumstances where proposals for solar are not covered by the generous permitted development rights I've mentioned, it is still an option for people to apply for permission for the installation of solar panels. That's a matter for the Planning Authority, and such applications will be considered taking account and weighing up what is very supportive renewable energy policy in the National Planning Framework 4, alongside policy relating to heritage objectives and any other relevant considerations.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The recent change in permitted development rights has actually led to a significant degradation in the country's built environment, particularly in conservation areas, due to the loose nature of the regulation, meaning that PVC windows can be installed, for example, which actually have poor through life cycle performance compared to timber. Would the Minister consider, therefore, having more codified guidance for conservation areas to ensure that people are making the right decisions with the best informed practical information based on best practice across the country? And that could actually encourage the unit cost of installations such as sash and case windows that are timber to come down in price, because more people will be encouraged to buy that.
Minister.
I thank the member for his point. I know he is very interested in the built heritage. On the point about windows, I should say that the permitted development right for the alteration or replacement of windows in domestic or non-domestic buildings relates in conservation areas primarily to the front elevation of properties continuing to be restricted in most areas. There are different rules for listed buildings as well. However, as I say, there is a degree of authority for local authorities when they are approached by people in these situations too.
Question number 2, Carol Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it last discussed plans to reduce corridor care and the use of temporary escalation spaces with NHS boards.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Health boards operate their own escalation policy for the management of inpatient capacity. This includes well-established processes with locally agreed trigger points for maintaining a safe service and ensuring patient safety. Capacity challenges can necessitate the provision of care in non-standard areas for some patients. This decision is not taken lightly and is made to relieve pressure in other parts of the system, in particular to prevent ambulance stacking and allow crews to respond promptly to the most serious incidents. Every effort will be made to accommodate patients in an inpatient ward, and we are working with boards to free up capacity in acute sites.
Mochan.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. RCN's Corridor Care report revealed some harrowing truths about the current realities of NHS patient care. The pressure of overcrowding have forced staff to care for patients in areas which are unsafe and inappropriate. Corridor care compromises patient privacy and dignity, and it should not be accepted as the norm. To show the Scottish Government recognises that staff across health and social care are at breaking point, I ask the Cabinet Secretary today to commit to publishing regular data on corridor care.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I thank Carol Mochan for a question and recognise the pressure that has been on staff. I also recognise and thank the RCN for its report. The report was obviously a snapshot taken during the peak of flu demand over the Christmas period, when we have an exceptional level of flu prevalence. But I also recognise that those staff members who took part in that will also have felt pressure before that as well, and outside of that flu period. And of course we recognise that there is a link between patient safety and capacity, and so these are incredibly important questions, and one that we continue to work with boards. And the importance of the passage of this budget is so that the measures that we're taking to reduce demand upon the system and to free capacity are able to be taken forward.
Thank you. Declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. As one nurse explained in the harrowing RCN report, in a department with capacity for 13 beds, we had 40 in, with patients on chairs having treatments administered, also sitting in the waiting room on cardiac monitors, using privacy screens to put around patients to use the bedpan. Cabinet Secretary, imagine the indignity. The First Minister told journalists that multiple crises are facing too many parts of our NHS. The First Minister was pressed about these parts but refused to answer. So can the Cabinet Secretary now be straight with us and tell us which parts of the NHS are in crisis?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I absolutely recognise the points that Sandesh Gulhani makes. I also, as I did with Carol Mochan, reflect on the fact that the period in question we're talking about was at the peak of the winter flu spike, where we saw the highest level of flu incidence to when, I believe, records began in 2010. So we're talking about a period of exceptional demand. I also recognise the picture that has been portrayed by Mr Gulhani around the indignity that patients in situations such as that are suffering, and that is why the passage of our budget is going to be so important, to ensure that we're able to relieve pressure, we're able to increase capacity and ensure better flow through our hospitals, so our patients and our staff are able to get a better service, because for too many people they're waiting too long or are being treated in inappropriate places.
Thank you. Question number 3, Paul O'Kane.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its stated commitment to end charges for non-residential care by the end of the current parliamentary session.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government continues to work with COSLA to identify options for the removal of non-residential care charges as part of wider work with partners on social care improvement.
Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, with less than 18 months of parliamentary time to run, it sounds to me like this is another SNP promise made in their manifesto that will not be met. And broken promises have consequences, particularly for people in many local authorities now across Scotland who are looking at having to introduce care charges for the first time for people with physical and learning disabilities. This also sits at the back of a litany of promises which were made to disabled people: access to a changing places toilet fund, annual health checks for people who have learning disabilities, a LDAN bill, the Human Rights Bill and the ditched National Care Service. And now today we learn of £20 million wasted or unaccounted for from the Community Living Change Fund. So can I ask the Minister, when will her and her government finally deliver on this pledge to end these charges and rectify a long list of broken promises to Scotland's disabled community?
Minister.
The Scottish Government and our partners remain absolutely committed to reviewing non-residential charges as part of the broader reform of social care. I've heard directly from disabled groups and vulnerable individuals across Scotland about the significant impact these charges have on their lives, and I have directed my officials to continue working with COSLA and with local partners to explore any possible options to achieve this objective, considering the current economic climate. I recognise the member's interest and advocacy in this area, but I think it's quite rich for a member of the Labour Party to lecture me on broken promises.
Question number 4, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how it protects the environment and the interests of local communities regarding the construction of battery storage plants within rural settings.
Mr Alistair Allen.
Scotland's national planning framework ensures potential impacts of developments in communities and nature are important considerations in decision-making. All applications are subject to site-specific assessments. Are you having problems with the microphone?
It's on now, you register. Carry on speaking just now, Minister.
Okay. Details on the consenting process are set out in the Electricity Applications for Consent Regulations 1990 and the Electricity Works Environmental Impact Assessment Scotland Regulations 2017. That is a UK law applicable in Scotland. Developments under 50 megawatts are determined by planning authorities in accordance with the Town and Country Planning Development Management Procedures Regulations 2013. We are considering recent advice and modelling published by NESO, along with the measures in the UK Government's Clean Power Action Plan to inform our approach.
Willie Coffey.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? We know that the consenting process for these battery storage plants falls within the UK Government's planning process under their Electricity Act, and which is totally inadequate. What concerns me is the lack of local consultation that takes place, the poor management of the installation of these facilities and the significant damage caused to the rural environment. Can the Minister please give me an assurance that the Scottish Government will act on these concerns and make sure that local communities feel that they are valued and that the place in which they live is protected and enhanced for generations to come?
Minister.
On the point I think the member made about maintenance, and I don't know if this alludes to the question of safety, that when the Fire and Rescue Service in Scotland are informed about these applications, they do input into the process. In terms of some of the wider questions the member raises about the benefit to Scotland, the benefit to the community, despite the powers to mandate community benefits being reserved to the UK Government, Scotland has made progress through our voluntary good practice principles framework, and these encourage developers to offer community benefits as standard on all renewable energy projects. We are currently undertaking a joint review and consultation on the Scottish Government's good practice principles for onshore and offshore energy developments, which will consider our approach to community benefits from battery storage.
Question number 5, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether feasibility studies and development expenditure for ports and harbours will be eligible for funding as part of the investment in maintaining and improving ports and harbours that is proposed in its draft budget 25-26.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
Within the ferries budget for 2025-26, £80 million has been forecast for piers and harbours to support and enhance ports across the Clyde and Hebrides and Northern Isles ferry services. This includes committed projects, new works, early design and business case development. CMAL lead delivery on this and also work with third-party port owners where investment is required to support new vessels and other network improvements. For ports out with the Lifeline ferry network, other routes to funding are available, and I am aware, for example, of ongoing dialogue between Scottish Enterprise and Fraserburgh Harbour around the port's master plan and other economic opportunities.
Karen Adam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Fraserburgh Harbour has ambitious plans to develop its infrastructure and be the first port of call supporting vital Scottish industries, especially offshore wind and our fishing fleet. However, Fraserburgh Harbour must also fund at risk its necessary development and feasibility works. What reassurance and advice can the Cabinet Secretary give Fraserburgh Harbour, and will she meet with myself and the Harbour Board to discuss further?
Cabinet Secretary.
So Karen Adam is a strong champion of Fraserburgh Harbour, and I met the board with her previously. Of course, it is an independent trust port, and it is important to reiterate the discussion taking place between Scottish Enterprise and Fraserburgh Harbour around that master plan and the economic opportunities, including what new port infrastructure might be required to support these economic prospects. So that's included Scottish Enterprise engaging with the port's consultants to provide input on key market opportunities. A meeting with relevant ministers can be considered at an appropriate stage, but I would advise that it may be more appropriate for economy, marine or energy ministers as portfolio leads, depending on potential funding sources, when it's finally suggested what funding is best pursued.
Brief supplementary, Liam Kerr.
Thank you. It's crucial for its master plan that Fraserburgh Harbour can leverage private finance, and that will be made far easier with the Government's full support. So will the Minister confirm her Government's unequivocal support for Fraserburgh Harbour master plan and promise to do all she can to back it?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I've heard first-hand about the master plan. I am enthusiastic as the Transport Cabinet Secretary of what their vision and ambition is. You will be aware that there's £150 million in offshore development support, which particularly is, if you recognise, that's a tripling of the funding that's available. So in terms of that decision-making about the economic aspects of the master plan, that wouldn't necessarily lie in my portfolio, but I was very enthused and impressed when I met that Harbour Board, who, remember, are voluntary individuals in that trust port, and I think they're doing a fine job.
Question number 6, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with Transport Scotland regarding safety measures that show head flyover on the A725 in Coatbridge.
Cabinet Secretary.
As Government Minister, I've had no specific discussions regarding Shorehead flyover with the Scottish Government's transport agency, Transport Scotland. However, I am aware that officials from Transport Scotland and their maintenance contractor are in dialogue with Mr McGregor as the local constituency MSP regarding the operation and safety performance of a nearby signalised junction and potential remediation or action.
To McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. She will be aware that this road is unfortunately a hotspot for accidents and has been a major concern for many of my constituents. As she said, I know she's also aware that I've had several and ongoing meetings with Transport Scotland, the Scottish Roads Partnership, AME, amongst others, regarding improvements at the junction. I have to say Transport Scotland and the other agencies mentioned have been excellent at communicating with me and been open to improvements, and I'm pleased that at the most recent meeting it was agreed further reviews were going to take place around implementation of a filter lane at one of the junctions, and further discussions with Safety Camera Scotland following the results of a recent red light survey. Can I therefore ask the Cabinet Secretary what the Government can do to support the transport agencies to ensure any required improvements are undertaken as soon as possible?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I will ask officials at Transport Scotland to conclude the review work as soon as possible and prioritise any recommendations for early delivery. And can I recognise Mr McGregor as the constituency MSP for being a persistent and effective representative for his constituents in pursuing this very important issue for them.
Question number 7, Elena Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting the public and private sector to develop carbon literacy skills.
Minister Alistair Allen.
Promoting carbon literacy is essential to achieving net zero. That's why, through the work of our enterprise agencies and Business Energy Scotland, we have ensured support and guidance is available to help businesses understand and reduce their carbon emissions while aiding climate resilience. It's also why we are committed to working in partnership with public bodies, including through the Sustainable Scotland Network, to help them fulfil their climate change duties and demonstrate climate leadership. As part of this, we are currently drafting new statutory guidance that will improve climate literacy across the public sector.
Elena Whittam.
Scotland was one of the first countries in the world to acknowledge that we face a climate emergency. Does the Minister agree with me that it's crucial that we take every step possible to ensure we support the upskilling of businesses and organisations to inspire changes in behaviour, to improve our environment, the quality of people's lives and well-being, and the places that they care for, such as the carbon literacy courses delivered by 2045, the way forward in my constituency?
Minister.
I agree wholeheartedly with the member about the need to support the upskilling of businesses and organisations across our economy. That is vital if we are to deliver the changes needed for net zero and if we are to realise the very significant benefits of adopting more efficient, sustainable practices. As I have said, the Scottish Government continues to provide support for carbon literacy through our enterprise agencies and our work across the public sector. But of course we also need to see action from out with government, and that's why I welcome the efforts of businesses, like one highlighted by the member herself, the Way Forward 2045, which I know Elena Whittam has mentioned in parliamentary motions. I know in the past year that particular business was shortlisted for a Vibes Scottish Environmental Business Award in the Just Transition category. So that kind of recognition is a further way in which we are encouraging positive change and greater carbon literacy across our economy.
Thank you. And a concise question 8, Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports at Falkirk Council is to consider a motion calling for immediate action by the Scottish Government to support the Grangemouth chemical cluster and the future of its industry.
Minister Alistair Allen.
I recognise the criticality of the Grangemouth cluster and its contribution to Scotland's economy. We are committed to playing our part to secure a sustainable and long-term future for the complex. We have jointly funded the Project Willow study that seeks to develop a set of commercial propositions for the site. We have also committed £50 million to the Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal. I am also working closely with Scottish Enterprise and SDI to identify and work with partners with an interest in investing in the cluster. Within the draft budget, there is also £8.75 million directly attributed to Grangemouth, and I am committed to working with industry and the community through the Grangemouth Future Industries Board to identify interventions and projects that maximise outcomes. I also call on the UK Government to go further and to ensure that they leave no stone unturned in achieving our shared ambitions for Grangemouth.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Minister for that answer. I can confirm that a motion has been lodged today by the SNP group, and critically they are calling for the Grangemouth Future Industry Board to expand its scope to focus on the here and now. Ministers, the workers in Grangemouth don't just want jam tomorrow, they want bread and butter today. So is the Scottish Government hearing the call for real action to protect the skills base and the vital chemical cluster? The UK Government is doing nothing. I implore the Scottish Government to do as much as they possibly can.
Minister.
Well, a number of the interventions I've just mentioned are very much about the here and now, and Falkirk Council's motion and indeed Michelle Thompson have highlighted the tension at the heart of all that the partners are doing here to ensure that Grangemouth has a key role to play in Scotland's net zero future. But to do that, it also needs to have, as the member says, a here and now. So that was very disappointing. It was very disappointing to hear nothing at all from the Chancellor yesterday, not a single commitment or comment which would either help avoid an abrupt and unnecessary closure of the refinery or support Grangemouth's transition to play its part in Scotland's green economy. We need all the partners on the Grangemouth Future Industry Board to be working together constructively and with real urgency to do all they can once Project Willow reports to progress its recommendations, as many of these recommendations will fall to the UK Government to use its reserve powers to take forward, and as the UK Government co-chairs the board, we will need this Labour Government to do what it has said it would do.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. And at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. From day one, we told the SNP that Humza Yousaf's NHS recovery plan would not help patients. That was back in 2021. And only now, Humza Yousaf's big promises are finally in the bin. All these years have been wasted while patients suffered and John Swinney insisted that everything was going great. He has now grandly announced all the same ideas that the SNP have already failed to deliver. But still, with absolutely no credible explanation about how any of it will actually be achieved. So how can John Swinney expect anyone to believe that he will ever deliver his recycled promises?
First Minister.
President, Sir, at the start of the week I set out the Government's focus, which will be on three key areas: on ensuring the resources are used to have the greatest effect and impact on driving down waiting times and clearing treatment backlogs, on reform of the system to deliver the right care in the right place, and a long-term shift to prevention. And we will accomplish that by making sure that we provide the necessary policy direction, which I've just set out, and also the resources which will be included in the Government's budget, with the biggest settlement for the health service. And I'm very pleased that we have parliamentary support for the budget, but it's well shown that the Conservatives are not part of the agreement to try to move the health service forward in any way, shape or form.
Russell Finlay.
I hope John Swinney heard what the BMA had to say about his speech, which was this. Dr Ian Kennedy of the BMA said, "We still lack the detail and comprehensive vision needed to make any plan a reality." In a classic case of government by press release, all that matters to John Swinney is an easy headline with no interest in the difficult job of delivery. So here's an example of that. 6 years ago, all NHS patients south of the border were given an app to access information. They can make appointments, order prescriptions, view medical records and more. 2 years later, in 2021, the SNP announced plans for a Scottish NHS app. But there is no app, and John Swinney has the audacity to announce it all over again. The SNP has kept Scotland's NHS trapped in the analogue age. So when exactly will Scottish patients get access to this vital technology?
First Minister.
What I set out on Monday, and what's been followed up in very regular engagements between me and the Health Secretary and health service leadership around the country, are the practical steps to improve the health service and to secure delivery. So, for example, we will be concentrating on steps such as the expansion of the NHS Scotland Pharmacy First Service to improve access to health care, to ensure that we expand GP capacity within the country with a £10.5 million expansion of activity. We'll deliver a new acute anterior eye condition service which will free up a combined 40,000 hospital appointments per year within Scotland. We'll expand the capacity of hospital at home to create at least 2,000 beds by 2026. We'll be expanding capacity at national treatment centres at a number of centres like Gartnavel, Inverclyde, Stracathro, Perth Royal Infirmary, Queen Margaret Hospital and also the Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank, delivering extra cataract procedures. We'll also be reducing the radiology backlog. So I hope that's maybe enough detail that will... Well, Presiding Officer, I'm very happy to go on, Presiding Officer.
I'm content that your response is complete, First Minister. But before I call Mr Finlay again, I would just remind members that the purpose of this session is scrutiny. And if we have ongoing noise in the chamber, all that's happening is fewer members are going to have an opportunity to put a question. And I would ask all members to bear that in mind. Russell Finlay.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't making a single noise. I was just smiling in incredulity because I asked the First Minister about an app and he went off and read from some different script. And, you know, the answer tells patients there is no idea when this app will ever appear, if it does. And that's not the only reheated promise John Swinney made this week. A decade ago, the SNP announced plans to create a network of national treatment centres. They were supposed to be all over the country, if Shona Robinson would care to listen. But here we are, Livingston, not open, Ayrshire, not open, Perth, not open, Lanarkshire, not open, Edinburgh, not open, and Aberdeen, not open. And now John Swinney is again making the same old promises to deliver national treatment centres. So can he please tell the truth to the thousands of Scottish patients who are waiting in agony? When will these actually open?
First Minister.
Well, President Officer, here's some truth for Parliament. Here's some truth for Parliament. In the years of austerity, under the Conservative government, the capital budgets of the devolved governments and the United Kingdom government were slashed. Why? Because of economic and fiscal incompetence by the Conservatives. That's what happened. And I am now going to deliver the National Treatment Centres. But what's certainly not helped me, what has not helped me has been Mr Finlay's support for the economics of the madhouse brought forward by Liz Truss, who he wanted me to follow. He wanted me to do exactly what Liz Truss had done. Thank goodness I never followed the stupid ideas of Liz Truss and Russell Finlay.
Russell Finlay.
I only asked the man when he's opening these treatment centres. But what we heard back is the Populist Party's disease of blaming someone else for their failings. The SNP government gets record funding and they're continuing to pick the pockets of taxpayers, and the state of the NHS in Scotland is entirely on that lot there. The SNP need to stop chasing headlines and start doing some hard work. We need a health secretary who's focused on the job. Projects in press releases need to be delivered, and taxpayers' money should be spent much more effectively. Right now, across Scotland's health service, over £850 million is being spent on communications, HR and other departments. That's almost £1 billion a year on backroom corporate functions, not frontline medical services. If the SNP attempted to cut this bloated bureaucracy and kept their countless promises, then waiting lists can come down. So wouldn't it be better to spend less money on back office staff and more money on doctors and nurses?
First Minister.
Well, it won't be possible to spend more money on doctors and nurses if I follow the tax plans of Mr Finlay. Because the tax plans of Mr Finlay will cut £1 billion from public expenditure. And that would be stupidity on stilts coming from the Conservative Party, to add to all the other economic chaos that they have created. Now, Parliament faces a very simple choice in a few weeks' time. And Mr Finlay's wanting me to prioritise the health service and to make sure there is investment in place. There is investment in place. Parliament's got to vote for it. And what are the Conservatives going to do? The Conservatives are going to vote against a record funding settlement for the health service. That tells us all we need to know, that for all this posturing from the Conservatives, they don't care about the National Health Service.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week, the SNP attempted to launch yet another NHS recovery plan. Having been in charge of Scotland's NHS for 18 years, they have lost touch with reality and all credibility. The Royal College of Nursing said many nursing staff will not recognise the First Minister's description of a resilient and robust NHS in Scotland. Their current experience is of a service struggling to meet the needs of patients and leaving them to carry the burden of not being able to deliver the care and treatment required. The BMA Scotland said the plan lacks the detail and comprehensive vision needed to make any plan a reality. Unison said his hollow promises of jam tomorrow won't solve the critical problems facing the NHS in Scotland. Why does John Swinney think he is right and Scotland's nurses, doctors and patients are wrong?
First Minister.
Well, as Mr Sarwar knows, because I told him last week, I'm engaging directly with all of the interested parties in the health service to make sure that we create cohesive leadership and a focused agenda to improve and strengthen the National Health Service. That's what's occupying my time, it's what's occupying the time of the Health Secretary, and we're getting on with doing that. And we're not promising jam tomorrow. We're promising the largest budget settlement for the National Health Service in a few weeks' time. And the folk who are not going to vote for it are that lot and that lot.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney has been passing budgets for 17 years and things are still getting worse in Scotland. I'll just remind him of that. We've had 5 NHS recovery plans in less than 4 years. Plan 1, August 2021. The SNP First Minister said, this plan will drive the recovery of our NHS not just to its pre-pandemic level, but beyond. Instead, we're doing 50,000 fewer operations compared to pre-pandemic levels. Plan 2, July 22, SNP Health Secretary, I'm announcing some of the most ambitious targets in the UK. The SNP government didn't meet a single one of them. Plan 3, October 2023, SNP First Minister, this plan will cut waiting lists by 100,000. Instead, waiting lists went up by 20,000. Plan 4, June 2024, SNP Health Secretary, I'm not looking to publish another strategy. Our task now centres on listening and delivery. Now this week, a new plan and a new strategy. After such a record of failure, why should anyone believe John Swinney and the SNP?
First Minister.
Mr Sarwar made the same mistake that Jackie Baillie made last week, of saying that things are getting worse week by week. So we'll go back to the same information that I put on the record last week. A&E waiting times, 4-hour performance, has increased week on week since the week ending the 22nd of December. So Jackie Baillie and Anna Sarwar once again are
Members,
saying to people
let's hear the First Minister.
Are not true. What the government set out on Monday in my speech was a series of interventions to strengthen the National Health Service and its capacity by delivering extra procedures at a number of centres around the country, by improving the referrals through radiology services, through expanding the rapid cancer diagnostic service, by making sure that we have the expansion of capacity in a range of different disciplines through eye condition care and also through the NHS Scotland pharmacy service. Now, these are the practical steps that will make a difference. Yep. But they will only happen. They will only happen if the government's budget passes. And who stands in the way of the government's budget passing? Who's not going to lift a finger? Who is not going to lift a finger to support and endorse this investment? The Labour Party in Scotland. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Anna Sarwar.
That answer proves why John Swinney can't fix the problems in our NHS. Because Scotland's NHS is in desperate need of reform, but the brutal truth is that John Swinney can't see the damage that his party has done. He can't see it, but I tell you who can. The 863,000 people stuck on an NHS waiting list, the 100,000 Scots who've been waiting for over a year for treatment, the record number of people forced to pay to go private, and the staff who his government is failing every single day. We need a Scottish Government that will do whatever it takes to clear the NHS backlogs, that will make sure the NHS is there when Scots need it, always free at the point of need and fit for the future. So why can't John Swinney see that after 18 years, it's not another failed SNP First Minister, not another failed SNP Health Secretary, not another failed SNP plan that Scotland needs? It's a new government and a new direction.
First Minister.
There wasn't a single solution offered by Anna Sarwar. Not one.
Let's hear the First Minister.
Well, look, listen. We'll be here as long as it takes for me to explain the point I'm going to make to Parliament today. Oh, I see the
First Minister.
I see the allies have come to the rescue.
In front of me, on the screen, I am aware of a huge number of members who'd really like to put a question today. I'm very, very keen that our constituents have an opportunity to hear this session, and I would ask all members to bear that in mind. First Minister.
I see, Presiding Officer, that Mr Sarwar's allies in the Conservative Party have come to his rescue once again at First Minister's questions. There was not a single solution offered by Anna Sarwar in all of that long diatribe to Parliament, because he is high on rhetoric and low on delivery. He's high on rhetoric and low on delivery.
Thank you, members.
Because Mr Sarwar promised the WASPy women in Scotland that he would be at their side. And at the first whiff of change, the Labour government came in and shut the door on the WASPy women. That's why Mr Sarwar is high on rhetoric, low on delivery, and why Scotland doesn't take him seriously.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when the Cabinet will next meet.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Cabinet will meet next Tuesday, when Ministers will have the opportunity to consider the implications for the Scottish budget of the welcome agreement that's been reached with the Scottish Liberal Democrats, the Scottish Green Party and ALAPA. And all we're waiting for is some common sense to break out in the Labour Party and the Conservatives.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, it is because of the Liberal Democrats that the Scottish budget now includes a new Belford Hospital in Fort William, a replacement eye pavilion for Edinburgh, support services for babies born addicted to drugs, investment to make it easier for you to see your GP or an NHS dentist, long COVID care pathways, backing for hospices, new skills pipelines for care and offshore wind, business rate relief for hospitality, more affordable homes, a better future for young people at Corsford College, the right for family carers to earn more money for councils, for ferries and for social care. Our priorities will now be backed by hundreds of millions of pounds of government investment. Liberal Democrats acting responsibly, setting aside differences and getting things done. Presiding Officer, we also fought for a winter fuel payment for Scotland's pensioners, and it's happening. And that matters because this week we learned that a third of households are in fuel poverty. So can I ask the First Minister, after 18 years of SNP government, why are so many people still freezing in cold homes?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, first of all, it's the first time I've formally had the opportunity to do this in Parliament, to welcome the support the Liberal Democrats have expressed for the Government's budget and for the agreements that we have reached on policy priorities, which we've also reached with members of the Green Party and with the member from ALAPA. And that is an indication of how Parliament should work. And over the course of Mr Cole-Hamilton's question, he was subjected to the yaboo behaviour, principally of the Conservatives, who have contributed absolutely nothing to the budget process and have achieved absolutely nothing out of the budget process. Now, that's their actions, that's their conduct. The Labour Party is in exactly the same place. They've achieved nothing out of the budget process to date. And what I would say to Mr Cole-Hamilton is that parties have got to work together in the common interests of the people of Scotland, and I welcome the collaboration that has taken place, because this government is interested in delivering solutions for the people of Scotland, not coming here to posture like the Labour and Conservative parties are doing. We are interested in doing the hard work to deliver for the people of Scotland. We'll deliver a winter fuel payment for pensioners, and the Labour Party and the Tories will not be supporting it when the budget comes to Parliament.
Question number 4, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the recent CBI report, which reportedly suggests that businesses are preparing to cut staff and raise prices.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I was deeply concerned to read the CBI report on business confidence in the UK. In my regular engagement with Scottish business, I hear directly that the impact of the recent employer national insurance contribution increases at a UK level is a significant factor. The Scottish budget for 25-26 includes a raft of measures to support business and economic growth, as well as enhanced measures to attract private investment.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the First Minister for that answer. The CBI's monthly survey highlights weak hiring intentions, with business and professional services expecting a 20% reduction in headcount, while consumer services anticipate a sharper 44% fall. Labour's employers' national insurance hike is a tax on jobs, and their decisions are already beginning to bite. Can the First Minister outline what engagement his government has had with the UK government to get them to see sense and rethink their daft decision to tax jobs in order that we can protect the Scottish economy?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I have raised the impact of this planned increase in reserve taxation with the UK Government and wrote to the Chancellor earlier this month. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government has also raised the issue with the Treasury. We've made clear the wide-ranging concerns that the impact this change will have on Scotland, which was introduced with no consultation. The UK Government seems determined to ignore these concerns, but we will continue to raise this issue and the impact it will have on the Scottish economy. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government will be meeting the Chief Secretary to the Treasury next month and will raise this issue. And it seems to me that this particular decision is having a damaging effect on the UK Government's growth agenda, one of which I am wholly supportive, but this measure is counterproductive in trying to deliver growth in the economy.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister is entirely right to raise concerns about Labour's tax on jobs. But the Scottish Government's budget for the coming year that he encourages us to support does little or nothing to support businesses in Scotland. According to Spice, spending on three key areas to help grow the economy, on the enterprise agencies, on Visit Scotland and on employability schemes, are all cut compared to the last financial year, whilst the Barnett consequentials from rates relief available south of the border for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses are not being passed on in this budget, shortchanging Scottish business. So why isn't this government doing more to support Scottish business?
First Minister.
I know Mr Fraser was a contender for the leadership of the Conservative Party, but he's just given an answer which is directly contradictory, to the position of his party leader. Because his party leader wants us to cut the budgets of agencies. He wants us to get rid of them. That's what he said. And Mr Fraser has just argued for an expansion of the budgets of economic agencies. Now, for the record, I happen to think Scotland today is extremely well served by our economic development agencies, Scottish Enterprise, Hans Anne's Enterprise, the South of Scotland Enterprise and Visit Scotland and Skills Development Scotland. I think they are working very well for Scotland because they are attracting significant investment and visitor numbers to Scotland. And if I add to that the capital investment for offshore wind that we are increasing to £150 million, or the £100 million that we are rolling out in terms of digital connectivity programmes, or the investment that we are putting into planning services, or the support that we put in place for non-domestic rates relief, which is worth an estimated £731 million. I think this government is on the side of business, and that's demonstrated by the business endorsement for the budget, and I think the Conservatives should support it.
Absolutely. Question number 5, Jackson Carlaw.
To ask the First Minister whether he will join His Majesty the King and other world leaders in commemorating the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz extermination camp and offer his reflections on the theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day for a better future.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on Holocaust Memorial Day, we honour the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis in one of the darkest chapters in human history. As we proclaim never again, we also reflect on the subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. This year we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and I welcome the decision of His Majesty the King to travel to Auschwitz to represent us all at the commemoration. This evening I am participating alongside Mr Carlaw and the Community Safety Minister at the Scottish ceremony for Holocaust Memorial Day. At that event, we will stand united against hatred, building one Scotland together for a better future.
Jackson Carlaw.
Can I thank the First Minister for that response and obviously welcome his participation at tonight's event, which incidentally I'm co-hosting with my Labour colleague Paul O'Kane. Can I commend the First Minister and the Scottish Government on the work they have done to ensure that education schemes that are available across Scotland are really second to none in comparison with any of those around the rest of the United Kingdom, and say that it is a real tribute to the efforts of this Parliament and the various governments that have presided within it that Holocaust education in Scotland is as remarkable as it is. If the theme is for a better future, surely that future is dependent not on us, but on the generation that follows. So fundamentally, those education programmes are critical to the understanding of the next generation. Will the First Minister commit to ensure that that funding of those programmes continues in perpetuity?
First Minister.
President Officer, first of all, let me associate myself with Mr Carlo's comments about the hosting of the event by Paul O'Kane this evening, and I welcome that cross-party cooperation on this question. In his members' debate last night, to which, of course, Mr Carlo gave, as ever, the deep and solemn commitment that he has always given to this issue in his contribution last night, he generously referred to the fact that I had taken part in one of the visits by school pupils from Scotland, which are supported by the Scottish Government, to Auschwitz. He correctly indicated that that day will never leave me, and the experience that I had that day. And as a consequence of, and I saw also the profound impact on the young people that travelled with me on that occasion as well. It was, for me, an indication of the value of the investment the Government makes in ensuring that future generations understand and appreciate the awfulness of what happened in the Holocaust and why that has to be reminded to future generations. So he has my unequivocal commitment, for as long as I am First Minister, that this Government will be firm funders of Holocaust memorial education in Scotland. I see it as part of our obligation to the past and the future, and it will have my unreserved support as First Minister.
Question number 6, Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister, in light of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report, UK Poverty 2025, whether he will provide an update on the Scottish Government's action to tackle poverty in Scotland, including in relation to any potential impact of planned UK Government welfare reforms.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I welcome the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's report and the analysis, which finds that Scotland is the only part of the United Kingdom that will see child poverty rates decline, thanks to policies such as the Scottish Child Payment. Through the Scottish Budget for 25-26, we will go further, committing resources to develop the systems required to mitigate the two-child limit, with the Child Poverty Action Group estimating that scrapping this could lift a further 15,000 children out of poverty in Scotland.
Colette Stevenson.
The Joseph Rowntree Foundation confirms in its report that child poverty rates in Scotland remain much lower than those in England and Wales, due at least in part to the Scottish Child Payment. Whilst this is very welcome, the Labour UK Government is doubling down on austerity measures like the two-child limit, bedroom tax and benefit cap, and now welfare reforms that could slash benefits for hundreds of thousands of long-term ill and disabled people. Can the First Minister offer an assessment on the potential impact of UK welfare reforms on poverty levels in Scotland, and outline how the draft Scottish Budget for 25-26 will expand anti-poverty work here?
First Minister.
The Joseph Rowntree Foundation analysis expects the gap in child poverty rates between Scotland and the rest of the UK to widen because of the action we are taking in Scotland to tackle these issues through measures such as the Scottish Child Payment. I obviously encourage the Labour Government to take a different course to the one that has been advertised. We have the maintenance of the two-child limit. This Government is going to act to remove that in Scotland, but obviously our task will be made easier if it was remedied at UK level. And of course we will take every measure we can. We're taking further measures in the budget through the two-child limit, the steps on expanding free school meals to try to address the issue of child poverty, which is the overriding priority of my government.
Supplementary, Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The report is, of course, serious and sobering, as it is every year, and shows child poverty rates static in Scotland at 24%, 250,000 children in poverty. The First Minister and I have debated constructively these issues before, and it will not be lost on him or members across the chamber that these rates do mean that we are seriously off course in terms of meeting the statutory child poverty targets set in this chamber. The report also highlights there's a higher than average proportion of working age adults, either unemployed or economically chronically inactive and households where someone is in work took home a lower level of earnings than the UK average. So does the First Minister recognise the importance of supporting people into secure, well-paid work? And given recent years of cuts to employability services, what is his government doing to reverse the trends outlined in the report?
First Minister.
These are important questions, and as the government's Bright Start Best Futures strategy indicates, the way to tackle child poverty is by a combination of measures, whether it's direct payments such as the Scottish Child Payment, or by employability support or childcare support or transport support. And all of these are part of the government's budget proposals. In relation to economic inactivity, the government is safeguarding funding for employability schemes. And because of the confidence we have about the parliamentary passage of the budget, as a consequence of our agreement with partners in Parliament, we are able to give early certainty to employability schemes in Scotland that they didn't have last year in relation to the financial challenges that we faced. So there will be much more certainty about the rollout of employability programmes from the 1st of April, and the Deputy First Minister and the Finance Secretary are taking forward that assurance to organisations around the country. Now, Mr O'Kane, I know Mr O'Kane is deadly serious on issues about child poverty, and as he knows, I am. And this is where I get just a bit concerned about where parliamentary discourse has got to, because there is a budget to come. There is a budget to be voted for. Mr O'Kane wants employability support to be put in place for members of the public in Scotland. So do I. I'm going to vote for it. I hope he and his colleagues will too.
Yep. Thank you. I have 25 requests for constituency and general supplementaries. If members are concise, we'll be able to get through more and involve more members. And I call Elena Whittam.
Recent research from Pro Bono Economics has found that disability benefits improve people's well-being and health and are more positive for the economy than costly. The Labour UK Government has meanwhile proposed cutting UK disability payments, as we've heard from my colleague Colette Stevenson, causing widespread concern from stakeholders. Can the First Minister advise what assessment the Scottish Government has made of this new research, and can he provide assurances that, unlike the UK Government, this SNP Scottish Government will continue to deliver social security based on the principles of dignity and respect?
First Minister.
Those principles are enshrined in law. Why? Because this government put them into law, and we intend to follow that through consistency. And my colleague Elena Whittam has my absolute assurance on that question. The government is investing around £1.3 billion more than funding we are forecast to receive from the UK Government through the Social Security Block Grant Adjustment, because we want to invest in supporting people to be able to make as much of an economic contribution as they can, and that will be the ethos of this government.
Thank you. I call Liz Smith.
Will the First Minister join me in condemning what was the third data breach of patient confidentiality by NHS Tayside in the El Jamel case, further undermining the trust of former patients? And while that matter is now rightly in the hands of the Information Commissioner, can I ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government can take to stop these data breaches ever happening again?
First Minister.
President, so the law on freedom of information is absolutely crystal clear. All organisations should comply with it, and they should follow its provisions. If the matter has been looked at by the Scottish Information Commissioner, I will leave the Commissioner to undertake his statutory duty.
Thank you. Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of reports regarding the sudden death of Demi Hanaway in May 2021. Demi's parents are calling for an examination into her death, which was recorded as suicide, and have lodged a formal complaint about the police response, saying there was absolutely no investigation. Demi was subject to physical and mental abuse at the hands of her partner, who was jailed last year, admitting threatening and abusive behaviour, but her family believe there are obvious lines of inquiry around her death that weren't pursued. It has also emerged that the pathologist in the case was not informed by the police that Demi's partner had a history of strangling her. Can I ask if the Scottish Government will consider ordering a review into the investigation of Demi's death?
Minister. I am familiar with these details, and I extend my sympathies to the family of Demi Hanaway and also understand the concern that they have about the information that has been put in the public domain. The issues that Claire Baker raises are, and I'm also familiar with the fact that there is a complaint that's been made which has been handled through the professional standards channel of the police. The Crown reserves the right in all circumstances to review any new evidence in a particular case and obviously does that independently of government. And it would be wrong for me to prejudge any of that information. But I will raise with the Lord Advocate the point that Claire Baker has made to me today about the desire of the family for further investigation in this case, because that would have to be a matter for the Crown to take forward, given the circumstances of the case. But I give Claire Baker the assurance that I will ensure that's the case as a consequence of our exchange today.
Claire Adamson.
Presiding Officer, this week marks the 5th anniversary of the UK exit from the EU. A recent IPPR report highlighted the slump in trade with the EU. It said that trade policy had been muddled and rudderless since the 2016 Brexit vote. Can the First Minister give a response to the report? Does he agree that Brexit has been an economic disaster for Scotland and Scotland's best interests would be to return to the EU as an independent nation?
First Minister.
I do agree with Claire Adamson on both points, that Scotland would be best served being an independent member of the EU, and also that Brexit has been an economic disaster for Scotland as part of the United Kingdom, and it's a consequence of our membership of the United Kingdom that we have lost our EU membership. The economic damage that's been done is so obvious. That is what is undermining living standards in this country. I accept that. I acknowledge that, and I have a solution to that, which is that we should repair our relationship with the European Union and ensure that our businesses and organisations can trade and that we can benefit from freedom of movement. I hope, and we are encouraging, and I assure Parliament we are encouraging the United Kingdom Government to repair that damage that's been done to our economy and our relationship with Europe, because the living standards of the population depend on it, and it has to be given greater priority than it's been given since the change of government in July last year.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Scottish Retail Consortium reports that theft has reached record levels, costing businesses £170 million last year. Violence towards shop workers is on the rise, with an average of 170 incidents every day over the year 2023-24. The situation is spiralling out of control as perpetrators are becoming more brazen. It is clear thieves simply do not fear committing their crimes. First Minister, what is the Scottish Government's plan to ensure shoplifters, many of whom are violent, are made to pay for their actions and know that their actions will have consequences?
First Minister.
The Minister for Investment, Tom Arthur, met with the industry leadership group, which involves the many retail interests, this morning on this question. And of course, in the budget, which subject to parliamentary approval, we will be making £3 million available to tackle retail crime, and we commit ourselves to support some of the innovative work that's been taken forward by the Scottish Partnership Against Acquisitive Crime, which is led by Police Scotland and the retailers. The partnership is taking a collaborative approach to preventing and deterring crimes such as shoplifting, and we will work constructively to ensure that's the case, using the resources that I hope Parliament will support in the budget process.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was recently contacted by a constituent who is on the waiting list for social housing with her 13-year-old daughter. They have been sharing a room and bed for 9 months. But by the time they are allocated housing, her daughter will be 16 years old. Does the First Minister think this is in any way positive to their well-being? Will his government finally step up with real action to end the housing emergency and accept unacceptable waiting times for social homes?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I sympathise with the circumstances of Mr Chowdhury's constituent, and I of course want individuals to be adequately and properly housed in our country. The Scottish Government, as Mr Chowdhury knows, because I have told the Parliament this several times on many occasions, the Scottish Government has presided over an affordable housing building programme which has built more houses per head of population in Scotland than in any other part of the United Kingdom. And crucially, in the budget that is going to be before Parliament in a few weeks' time, there is an increase in the budget to £768 million. Now, Mr Chowdhury is quite entitled Indeed, it's his duty to bring the concerns of his constituents here and represent them. I would also contend it's Mr Chowdhury's duty to try to make solutions happen by voting for the budget and helping to build more houses and to ensure that we can get more void houses used by people. And there's no point Labour members shouting at me as they've done all day today. That's the solution. If we want to build houses, how do we pay for them if we don't have the votes? So I would encourage Labour members to stop being observers on the sidelines, sitting there with our Tory allies, vote for the budget and do something constructive for Scotland.
Presiding Officer, given the vital importance to the Highlands and Islands of access to be able to export our fine malt whiskies, our high-quality salmon and shellfish and many other products, will the Scottish Government provide its full-throated and unequivocal support for the third runway at Heathrow, which is the future gateway for Scottish Highlands and Islands exports to the willing world?
First Minister.
The decision to allow expansion at Heathrow Airport lies exclusively with the United Kingdom Government, and the Scottish Government will engage closely with the UK Government and with Heathrow Airport to understand any potential impact of the Heathrow expansion on Scotland, particularly on our climate targets and on connectivity. I share Mr Ewing's aspiration that Scottish goods should be able to get to market as quick as possible. But I'm reminded that when I was in Shetland a few months ago, the fish sector were explaining to me just the obstacles that are in their way to get their product to market because of the stupid procedures involved in Brexit, which are deeply damaging to our economy. So if we want to get Scottish produce from the Shetland Islands and from other communities in Scotland more quickly to European markets, then getting agreements in place with the EU that would allow freer trade to be undertaken would be the immediate priority of my government. And what I can say to people in Scotland is that they have to understand the colossal damage that was done to our country's economy by Brexit, inflicted on us by a bad deal by the Conservatives, and I hope the Labour Government will do something to rectify that, because it's undermining the Scottish economy.
Stu Webber.
First Minister, today the Auditor-General and the Accounts Commission have said that the Scottish Government have made minimal progress on their target to reduce car usage by 2030 and that the target has no clear delivery plan. Always sounds familiar. To reduce car usage, it is essential to have an affordable public transport. Yet under the SNP, Scots seem to be turning away from these services in droves. Does the First Minister still believe that the 2030 target is still achievable, or is this another headline-grabbing deadline that was never ever going to be delivered?
First Minister.
There are a whole range of different interventions the Government has made to improve access to public transport, such as the fact that over 2 million children, young people, disabled and older people in Scotland are now benefiting from free bus travel. There's been over 150 million bus journeys have been made across Scotland by children and young people under 22 using their free entitlement. And we've been working to expand the opportunities for people to safely walk, wheel and cycle, with the expansion of that network to around 450 miles of routes for walking, wheeling and cycling. So the Government will do this as part of its plans. But it's frankly laughable for Sue Webber to take me to task on this issue, because every time a measure comes forward to this Parliament which has got the chance to change any of these patterns of behaviour, who opposes it? The Conservatives. Every single one of them. And then come here and posture with the empty rhetoric that we get every single week about these issues. And also, if Sue Webber wants investment in public transport, then all I can gently and respectfully encourage her to do is vote for the budget that will pay for it, rather than wasting our time coming here posturing on a weekly basis.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Alec Rowley, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.